Hope everyone had a joyous and safe holidays, and we're excited that you have decided to join us for our first Winsor Newton class of 2022, Finding Balance. My name is Tim DePack, and I'm from Winsor Newton, and I'll be your moderator today. I'm being joined by Mandy Peltier, who will be your artist instructor for today's class, and Mandy will be taking you through today's class by providing information about the product being used and showing you how to perform some of her favorite watercolor painting techniques, all while creating these carefully placed stones using the Winsor Newton Cotman Watercolor Sketcher Box set. She'll also give you a sneak peek of her next class, which will be on Tuesday, January 25th. There was a sketch outline that was available before this class. We will drop that in the chat for those who still need that and want to download it. And upon completion of this class, there'll be a survey sent in the email to you. Please let us know what you thought about the class, how we did, and if there's any particular topics that you'd like to see Mandy perform in future classes. And as Felicia said, the class replay will be available in 24 hours upon completion, and that will be found on michaels.com or the Michaels YouTube channel. Please feel free to follow along and paint with Mandy, or sit back and relax and enjoy the class. And I'm going to pass it over to Mandy.
All right, thank you, Tim. Hi, everyone, and Happy New Year. I'm really excited to be kicking off the year with this class. I think the phrase on this artwork can be a good New Year's resolution for all of us in some area of our life. I know it's true for me this year for sure. And we only have an hour, so I'm going to go ahead and share my other camera so we can get going. Okay, so I always start with overhead view of the supplies, so you can just quickly check the box and make sure you have everything that was on the supply list. So I have a glass of water, kind of important with watercolor, and I have the Sketcher's pocket set, and I have an artist palette that holds 7 colors because we will be mixing 7 colors today. And the color palette today is a little more what I would say is curated. A lot of my classes, I try to just use one color for a paint, or maybe just 2, but today's class is a little more curated. You'll learn some more about color theory as well. And I have a 1.0 Fineliner marker, and that's for the lettering. I mean, you could use whatever marker you have, or you could even paint it on, but that's what I'm going to be using today. I have a graphite pencil and eraser to draw the outline, and we'll be using a number 4 brush. I'm doing the same thing I did in my last class, where I have an older number 4 brush where the bristles are pretty worn down. And I'll be using the older one to mix my paint colors, and then a nicer looking one to actually paint with. And then I just have a paper towel for blotting. We will be doing a lot of blotting today. So make sure you have a paper towel, or even just like a hand towel that you don't mind getting dirty with watercolor paint. And then paper. So I have a sheet of 9x12, 140-pound professional cold press watercolor paper, Winsor Newton brand, that I've cut in half along the long edge to have a 6x9 sheet of paper. So I am going to hold that here. So this is the paper I'm using. However, this was a class, and Tim's going to interject here, that used a bundle or offered a bundle.
Yeah, so I would like to pass this on to everybody in the audience to let me know if you had taken advantage of clicking on and shopping for the products by the bundle, which had a different paper that's in there that's suitable for this class as well. So if you don't mind, just let me know in the chat, did you take advantage of the bundle that was on there, or did you have the materials already handy, or did you buy elsewhere? Please feel free inside the chat, or if you want to drop it on the survey, let us know how you think you purchase these products from us to prepare for this class.
All right, thanks, Tim. So I'll hold this up. This is the finished piece I'll be working from, or trying to duplicate. And this was made using the Winsor Newton Professional Watercolor paper, which is my favorite paper. But for this class, because of the bundle, I did make a few other versions using other papers that you can buy at Michael's stores. And so I want to kind of point those out so you can see the difference. So this one here was made with, actually, I want to show this one first. This one here was made with the Michael's 90-pound paper. I followed the instructions exactly. I took my time, and you can see there's a difference here between this one and this one. So yours may look more like this if you use this paper, the Artist Loft 90-pound. There's also this one that uses the Artist Loft 140 pounds. So this is slightly thicker paper. So yours may look more like this if you use this paper. And then I have one more here. This is the Winsor Newton student grade paper. So it's a pad that looks like this. I've used it in a lot of my classes for some of the more loose things. And so yours may look more like this if you use this pad of paper. So as you can see from these examples, the paper you use does yield a different look. So I just want you to keep that in mind. But I followed the same steps for all of them. Okay, so with that in mind, let's go ahead and start today by transferring our outline onto our working paper. So I'm going to set a few things aside for now so they're not in my way as I sketch the outline. And if you've taken one of my classes before, you know that this always gets cattywampus, just like it just did. But you also know that I like to pull over the actual outline that was provided as a download for the class to work from. It's a little bit easier, I think, than working from my finished example. So I'm going to start today by writing the lettering find balance. And if you count the space as a character, the center point is between the B and the A. So I'm going to, on my paper toward the bottom, I am going to draw a line right approximately through the center, just so I can kind of gauge my lettering. And I am going to draw the A, the L, the A. So I'm going to work to the right, and then I'm going to go back to the B and draw that, and then work to the left. So it's just how I like to work. You can do it however you want. If you're just good at eyeballing it to get it center, then, you go ahead and do that. I'm not very good at eyeballing it. I usually get it a little cattywampus. So this just makes it a little easier for me. So I'm just looking at my outline here and just trying to duplicate it as best I can. And I'm using an F pencil today. Hopefully you can see it at home. I know sometimes with Zoom, it's hard to see what I'm doing, especially with graphite. Graphite, for some reason, doesn't seem to show up very well. So I normally like to use a 4H or even a 5 or 6H pencil, because it's a lot easier to hide underneath watercolor paint when you're all said and done. But for these classes, I have to go a little bit darker, just so that there's a chance that you can see what I'm doing at home. All right. And I don't think the darker graphite pencils lift as well after you're done painting. I think the lighter ones do a better job of, like I said, hiding. So the good news with this project is it's a pretty easy project to draw, because we're basically just drawing ovals. And the other good news is they don't have to be perfect ovals. Each rock is a little different. Each rock is a little jagged. And so it's okay if they don't look exactly like this drawing. It's okay if there's some ridges and grooves in your ovals. And for some reason, I find it a little easier to draw ovals if I turn my paper a little bit. So I'm going to start with this bottom one that's the whitest. And I'm just going to draw kind of a rough oval shape. And then I'm going to sort of shape it from there to look more like what I have on the photo reference. And then I can erase what is, what I don't need. So that first initial kind of rough looking oval. And sort of clean up those lines here. And as far as the pattern on the rock, we'll save that after we get each initial oval shape drawn in. So now I'm going to draw the next up. And this rock is a little bit wider than the one we just drew. So I'm once again just kind of going to draw like a rough oval shape. And then I'm going to shape it to look a little bit more like what I see on my photo reference here. Once again, not worrying if it's not exactly perfect. So one tip for drawing is starting with the basic shape you see, and then I like to say carving it, forming it and carving it to look more like your subject from there. So the basic shape of all of these rocks are ovals. So that's why I'm starting with an oval shape. So I'm going to work towards the next one, another basic oval shape, and then I'm going to form and carve and shape it. All right. And I usually go pretty fast when I'm drawing my outlines. If you have time before my classes, it's always a good idea to transfer the outline ahead of time. It might save frustration and will certainly allow this process to be a little less overwhelming. And I'm going to move on to the next rock. This one is not as wide, thickness wise, I guess. So I'm going to start with a basic oval. And I'm going to shape it here. Erase what I don't need. And we have 3 to go. So we have the 3 smaller ones sitting on top, doing their little balancing act. So stacked stones, I believe, are also called cairns. There's a few different names for them, but I think they're very peaceful.
Mandy, I have a question from the audience.
Yes.
Someone was asking, Any advice on how to not make their rocks look like a baked potato or a zucchini? That's from M Hill. Any
Baked
advice on how to
potato.
draw them a little differently?
I would say again, just start with that basic oval shape and then, go from there. So I don't know if that really answers your question. That's funny.
I hope it did, M Hill.
All right. And then
we're trying.
yeah, no, you could do stacked potatoes. I like that. That's good. I mean, I guess like your details on them would look more like this one. It'd be more like little dots and lines than like arches. You could kind of do it that way. But I like the witty take on it. That's funny.
I would
like
say
it.
maybe more like not a regular potato, but maybe more like a yam, kind of like a little more
Oh, a yam.
down. Maybe if that.
Or fingerling potatoes. Those
Like
are
a little more
shapes.
visual.
Yeah.
And while I'm speaking, I want to tell everybody thank you so much for the comments back on the bundle package. Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right. So now I'm going to draw the little characters on the rocks, but I will say the ones that are most important are these two bottom ones. It's not as important with these four because you can sort of eyeball the little markings we're going to put on. So, I may even skip these four and we'll just do these bottom two to save time. So I'm going to put in these little lines here and this little kind of sideways Y shape marking. And then for the very bottom line, the arches are what's important. We're going to do a lift technique for the arches. And if you've been with me for a while and you took my, I have to think of the holiday, 4th of July popsicle class last year, we used a wipe and lift technique, and we're going to do something similar to remove paint from the arches today. So again, a little bit different. It's not exactly the same, but similar. All right. So I think that's probably good for the outline because we're going to spend a little more time mixing our colors today since it's a bit more of a curated palette. So I'm going to set this aside and I'm going to bring over a little color chart and the finished artwork. Maybe I'll flip-flop these in my artist palette, do some rearranging here, my Sketchers pocket box, and my older looking number 4 brush. Make sure I get the right one here. All right, I have my glass of water. So first things first, I'm going to place my brush in the water, swish it around, get those bristles nice and wet. And I'm going to use my brush as if it were a spoon. And I'm going to place 3 scoops of water into every single palette on my 7 well palette. So if you have more than 7 wells, you'll do 3 scoops into 7 wells. For me, I'll just do 3 in all. So just like a spoon, I'm going to use my brush and do 1 scoop, 2 scoops, 3 scoops. And I'm going to do that all around. And I like to use this technique in my classes because I think it makes it a little easier for you to duplicate at home what I'm doing over the camera. And it might help us get the paint, the correct paint to water ratios. There are some variables, when we go to apply color to these wells with the water in it, some of us may use heavier pressure than others. So there's some variables, but I think it helps. All right. And it makes it a little easier, I think, for you guys to understand what I'm doing. So like I said, we're going to be mixing 7 colors. I know there's only 6 colors on this palette, and that's because 1 color is just white. So I figured I didn't need to put that on the paper. You couldn't see it anyways, right? So we're going to start with white. So in the first well on our palette, I'm going to use Chinese white. It's the bottom right color in your palette. And I'm going to do probably 5 passes or so of white into the first well of my palette. When I say pass, I'm going to take my wet brush. I'm going to run it over the Chinese white half pan and stir it into 1 well in my palette, and then wipe my brush just a couple of times on the edge of the palette to release excess paint. That's 1 pass, but I usually do it a little bit faster than that. So for my 4 other passes to make 5 total passes, you can see I'm just going to run it, stir, wipe, run it, stir, wipe. What is that? 2, 3, and then here's 4. So it doesn't have to take a lot of time. The goal really is just to get an equal paint to water ratio. I even sometimes prefer even slightly more paint than water ratio. You want it to be thin enough that it glides on like watercolor should and not kind of go on thick or like as if you were dry brushing. But you don't want it to be so thin that the opacity is less than 50%. So that's sort of our goal here. So then I'm going to clean my brush and blot it. So there's going to be a lot of blotting today. And the next color I want to mix is our darker gray. I just have the two gray side to side so you can see that there are two different tones of gray. So we're going to start with this gray. I might also refer to it as our dark gray. And so we're going to mix our dark gray in the same way we mix black in most of my classes by doing pretty much equal parts of ultramarine blue and burnt umber. But then we're going to add white to it to lighten it and to turn it gray. So we're going to be talking about shades and tints and tones today with my color wheel. I'm going to pull it over here in just a little bit and explain what those are. But to get started here with the gray, I'm going to do one pass of ultramarine blue, one pass of burnt umber, and then we'll see where that gets us. So one pass of each. And so I did one pass of each, and this still looks a little brown. So if it looks a little brown, you need to add a little more blue. So I'm just going to keep working back and forth, just adding a little bit of each of these colors until I have what looks like a black color. It's just a little bit more blue. So I'm almost doing like quarter passes because I'm just barely dabbing my brush into each color to just sort of affect the tone of this color. So this is good here. I have a good black base that's still pretty watery. And I'm going to rinse my brush and blot it. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add white to it. It could be 2 passes, it could be 3 passes, just enough to give it a gray look. So you're going to want to clean your brush in between each pass of white and blot it on your paper towel so that we don't add black to the white half pan. And we want to blot in between so that we're not adding more water to our well. I hope that makes sense. So I'm going to do a pass of white, stir it into the gray. And then I'm going to rinse, blot, and then I'm going to do another pass of white. All right. And I have this color palette to kind of help us see if we're getting close to the right color. This is actually a little bit too light. So you can always just add a little bit more blue and a little bit more brown. And that will darken it right up. But we definitely want the white in order to get the right tone or hue. So I like how that looks. I'm happy with that. That's good. I will tell you that we will probably need to mix more gray today because we are going to use this gray to influence most of the other colors we're going to mix today. So this might be a good time to tell you about color theory here. So I have a color wheel. I have the normal pure colors on the outer ring of my color wheel. The next one in is when you tone something, and that's when you add white to it. It lightens it. When you tint something, it's when you add gray to it. So it darkens it just a little, but not like when you add black. So this inner ring is when you shade something. That's when you add black to a color. So we have shade, tints, tones, and then the pure color. So we're going to be tinting our colors, but to actually make them gray, we're actually going to be adding a little bit of white too. So we're kind of tinting and toning today. But I just wanted to point that out. I like using white. Not everyone does, but I like using white because it allows me to get the right hue, but also the right paint consistency. Some people can just add water to the color to dilute it and get it to the right value, but then your consistency is different from paint color to paint color. So to have them all be the right consistency and the right hue and value, I like to use white to do the job. All right, so that was a really long explanation. So let's move along here. The next color I want to mix is blue. So we're going to mix blue by first mixing our blue color, and then we'll tint it, and then we'll tone it. So I'm actually going to mix more of like an emerald, or I think it looks sort of like a peacock blue. I'm going to mix pretty much equal parts ultramarine blue and sap green. So sap green is the lighter of your 2 greens on the bottom row. So I'm going to start with maybe a pass and a half, maybe 2 passes of each, because we can always make adjustments. So maybe I'll just do 2 quick passes of each color. And it should look kind of like a bright blue, like a peacocky kind of blue. If it looks a little on the too green side, just add a little bit more blue. So hopefully you can see this color. It's such a pretty color. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure I release that excess paint on my brush. I'm going to rinse my brush, blot it. And then this is what I'm going to stir my brush into that gray. And then I'm going to stir it into the blue. And that tones it. And then to get it to the right tint or the right hue, I'm going to add a pass or 2 of white to it. So we're going to be pretty much adding gray and white to each color we mix today, just to kind of create this calming, peaceful palette that we have here. Yeah, and that looks good. I might add just a touch more blue to mine, touch more green. So you can always make little adjustments to get it how you want it. But I like that. That looks good. All right, so next up is pink. We're going to mix pink in the same way we mixed blue, where we're going to start with 2 initial colors. And then we're going to tint it with gray and tone it with white. So we're going to start with alizarin crimson and lemon yellow. So we're going to make more of like a salmon color or like a coral color to start with. So I'm going to start with the same number of passes of each, maybe 2 passes of alizarin crimson, and maybe I'll just start with 1 pass of lemon yellow. We just want the lemon yellow to influence the red a little bit. So maybe 2 passes of alizarin crimson, clean and blot, and then a good pass of lemon yellow. Ooh, it's a bright color. I like it. It's pretty. Almost looks fluorescent. And then just as before, I'm going to clean my brush, blot it, kind of just stir it quickly into the gray, and then stir that into the pink. And that's going to turn it into more of a mauve color. But then to get it to the right hue, I am going to tone it with a little bit of white. So, I mean, you can mix these colors however you want. Maybe you don't need such a calming looking palette. I just think this palette is really pretty. And adding the gray to everything just kind of makes it a little more cohesive and harmonious. All right, so we have our gray, we have our blue, we have our pink, we have our white too. Don't forget about that. It's kind of blending in with the palette. All right, so next up is green. I'm going to take a break and you on the green. There's only 3 colors we're using for green. We're only going to use the sap green. Then we'll tint it with gray and we'll tone it with white. So I'm going to start with a couple passes of sap green into the next well on my palette. And this makes more of like a sagey green when we're all said and done. So sap green, clean and blot, stir in a little bit of gray. That tints it real nice. And then we'll add some white. I probably will only need 1 or 2 passes of the white to get it to where I want it, just to kind of be a nice sagey green color. Yeah, looks good. So that was just with the sap green, and then some of the gray we mixed, and then some of the white. And I can tell we're going to need to mix more gray. That's okay. We can do that real quick. All right. And then next up is navy. So with navy, we are not going to use the gray or the white, but we are going to mix navy a bit differently than some of my other classes. Usually we mix navy by just combining ultramarine blue and burnt umber. We just use a lot more blue than we do brown. But today we're going to create more of like a midnight navy blue. And I'm going to do that by mixing red and green, which are opposites on the color wheel. And they create like a really dark, cool looking gray. And then I'm going to add blue to it to turn it into sort of the midnight blue shade. So we're kind of doing it in a roundabout way, but I like this shade of navy better than if we were to just mix ultramarine blue and burnt umber together directly. So I'm going to start by doing the same thing we did with the gray by mixing these 2 together until we sort of had a black, and then I added white to it. So I'm going to mix the alizarin crimson and Viridian hue, which is far left bottom row of your palette, until I have what looks like a nice gray. So we'll start there. So I'll just do a pass of each. And then I'm going to do like a back and forth game with them, just a little dab of red, a little dab of green until I have a gray. If it looks too green, you need to add more red. If it looks too purpley, you need to add a little more green. So just kind of add a little bit of each back and forth until you have what looks like a nice cool gray. And it should be quite watery still. You see how that's like just swirling in my well here. And then to turn that into a midnight blue, I'm going to add a couple passes of ultramarine blue. And this is such a pretty shade of blue. I really love this color. And then if your mixture is still a little too watery, if it's not quite equal paint to water ratio, you can just add a little more red to it and add a little more green to it. It's just those 3 colors to give us this really nice midnight blue shade. So I'm just doing a back and forth game now. There we go. I'm there. I'm right where I'm at on my palette. And then we have a light gray. So we mixed our darker gray, and now we're going to mix a light gray. We're going to start our light gray the exact same way we started the navy. We're going to mix alizarin crimson and Viridian hue until we have what looks like a nice cool dark gray, and then we're going to add white to it. So I'm just going to mix a pass of alizarin crimson, pass of Viridian hue, and it looks like I got it pretty much right the first time. So once you have what looks like a gray, rinse and blot and add white to it. And we want this to be a pretty light gray, so you may have to add a lot of passes. It kind of depends on how much red and green you needed to use to start off with gray. So I'm just going to work my way here. So the actual project doesn't take too long to paint, so that's the good news. Each rock gets 3 layers, but each rock is pretty small. But we'll get there in just a second here. So let me see if I got that right. Yep, that looks good. So you can hopefully see, I think this looks more like a mousy gray, and the dark gray looks more like an elephant gray or like a felt gray. And I know I'm going to need more dark gray, so I'm going to go ahead and mix that up right now as well. So if you need more dark gray, I'll remind you how you did it while I mix mine up. I start off with ultramarine blue and burnt umber, and I get what looks like a black, and then I just lighten it a little with white. So you see, I'm really going at it with my brush. So don't throw your old brushes away. They're really good for mixing colors, especially the way I mix them, where I really go for it. I'm not dainty. All right, I'm gonna get that just a little darker. So I'm just working back and forth between the blue and the brown and the white. There we go. I think we're good. Okay, so I'm going to now set my little color chart aside that hopefully helped us match up our colors, and I'm going to bring back over my actual outline. I'm going to switch to my nicer brush, and we're going to get going. So one other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to number these rocks to the left, because I think it's going to be easier for you to know which rock or stone I'm talking about if I point out the number. So starting at the top rock is 1, and then it just works its way down to rock 7. So we're actually going to be painting these rocks in an every other stone manner. So we'll start with the odd numbers. So rock 1, then go to 3, then go to 5, then go to 7. And then we'll go back up and do the even numbers. And the reason why is if we were to paint on rock 1 and then immediately move to rock 2, the wet paint from rock 1 would bleed into the new paint we're adding to rock 2. And this is a project where I don't want that to happen. I don't want that wet into wet to happen. So we'll be doing the odd numbers, letting those set into the paper, and then do the even numbers. So it's kind of going to feel all over the place, but that's why. It's just because we don't want wet into wet from one rock to the next. Okay, so for rock 1, we are going to start by applying white to the entire rock. We're going to start with white, just add white to the entire rock here. And then we are going to add the light gray color and a thin line across the top of the rock and along the bottom of the rock. So I've applied my white. I'm going to rinse and blot. I'm going to put a little bit of the light gray, so the one that looks more like a mousy gray. Put a little bit of that on the tip of my brush. And I'm going to run it along the very bottom edge in a fairly thin line and along the top edge. And we will allow this cool gray color or this light gray color to sort of bleed into the white. But we're just kind of starting our shadows and our depth from the very first step. So that's rock number 1. That's all we're doing for now, is just white to the whole rock and then light gray to the top and bottom edging. So we're going to skip to rock 3, which is the green rock. And this rock and a lot of the other rocks are going to receive a slightly different process. So I've done this in a lot of my other classes where we kind of create a gradient by applying a pure version of the paint to an area, then wetting our brush, wiping it on the edge of a palette, and then applying that to the rest to kind of create a nice soft gradient. So it's kind of what we're going to do with a lot of the rocks to get some value going. So for rock 3, I'm going to start with green. I'm going to load it up with my brush. I'm going to apply green to the top edge of the rock. You can do it fairly thick. This is probably 1/8 of an inch wide. So to the top edge and to the bottom edge. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to place my brush in my water glass for a second, just for a second. And I'm going to wipe it on the edge of my palette a few times. And what is now a very watered down or diluted version of green, I'm going to paint that on to what's left of this rock. And I'm going to allow the pure green I painted on along the top and bottom edge to just kind of naturally merge into this diluted version I'm kind of putting through the middle. So I'll hold that up so you can see. And then I'm going to do the same thing I did to rock 1, where I'm going to apply some gray to the very top and very bottom edge in a thinner line. But I'm going to use the darker of the 2 grays for that, the one we use to tint everything. So I'm going to put some of that on my brush, and I'm going to apply a thin line of it to the top of the rock and a thin line of it to the bottom of the rock. Just like so. And it doesn't have to be perfect right now. This is just the first layer. All right, so rock 5. Rock 5 is our blue rock. So I'm going to do rock 5 in pretty much the same manner I did rock 3, only we'll be using the blue, not the navy, the blue color, the one that kind of looks like I've heard it referred to as like Dutch boy blue. So I don't know what, maybe you could say in the chat what color you would refer to this as, but I'm going to apply a thick stroke of it along the top of the rock. It can be about 1/8 of an inch or so in thickness. I'm going to apply it along the bottom. So just like we did with the green rock. Now this is a much thicker rock. So after I apply it along the bottom, I'm going to do the same thing I did with the green, where I'm going to place my brush in the water for a second, but I don't really need to wipe it more than once or twice because I'll need a lot of water to add to the entire middle section. But just like with the green, we'll allow the water to just organically merge into the blue we applied to the top and bottom. You can see how it just kind of creates a value study even as the colors all bleed and merge into each other. You can blot your brush. And with this one, I am going to go ahead and apply a little bit of texture now. Whereas, you know, I haven't with the others so far. So I'm going to put a little bit more of that blue on my brush. And using the tip of my brush, I'm just kind of going to place little dots kind of all throughout the rock. You could do a few little dashes. And, you know, most of this is just going to bleed right into the water we just added, and that's okay. It's just going to start to create a little bit of texture. I wanted each of these rocks to look just a little bit different, so they each receive a slightly different, one receives a slightly different technique than the next. So this one, we're kind of just doing wet into wet kind of paint blooms.
I can actually see that absorbing as you're lifting.
Yeah. I feel like it could be one of those viral videos if you zoomed in and you're just, you know, watching paint blooms and bleeding out. I feel like it's a satisfying technique. All right. And then I am going to use the gray, the darker of the 2 grays. And I'm once again going to apply a thin line along the top edge and the bottom edge just to start to get some value in there. So we'll be using the tip of our number 4 a lot for this class. You could also do some of this detail work with a smaller brush if you wanted. Okay, so rock 7, this is where we're going to use the wipe and lift technique. But we're going to start by applying navy just to the top edge of the rock. And then we're going to do that diluted water technique and apply that diluted water to the rest of the rock. So as you can see in my finished example, the bottom of this rock is lighter in color. So we're only applying navy to the top edge, not to both the top and the bottom like we have the other rocks. So I'm going to put navy on my brush. I'm going to apply it as carefully as I can along the top edge. And then I'll place my brush in the water for a second and apply that diluted version to the remainder. And then I'll show you how we're going to lift. This is another one where you really don't need to wipe it much on your water glass container because you have a pretty large amount to cover with your brush. So smaller rocks, you need to wipe it several times along the rim to not have too much water or paint on your brush. But these larger ones, you don't need to worry about it as much. And you can always just blot real quick on your paper towel if you have a little bit too much on your brush. All right. So to do the wipe technique, what you're going to do is you're going to just rinse your brush blot it really thoroughly so that your bristles are moist but not soaking wet. And then you're just going to literally run it over both arches. Just run it over both arches. And you'll rinse and blot in between each time. So I'm just running my brush over the arches to lift that paint. And you can do it as many times as you need to lift the arches. But I think this makes a subtler transition than if you just tried to avoid the arches with your brush. I mean, that is one way you can do it, but I just think this overall makes a softer transition of color when it's all said and done. Okay, so we have first layer of our odd numbers done. Yay us. And now we're ready to work on the even numbers. So rock 2, which is the real thin rock at the top, is going to receive the same technique as the green rock, where we're going to use gray. And we're going to apply gray. This is a very thin rock, so just be careful here. We're going to apply gray, the darker of the two grays, along the bottom edge of the rock and along the top edge. So these are probably only a 1/16 of an inch wide because this is such a small rock. And then I'm going to place my brush in the water for a second, but this time I am going to wipe it several times because it's a small rock and I don't have much water to apply to cover the whole rock. So then water to the rest of the rock. And then while the water is still wet, I'm going to go ahead and start getting in some of those vertical, or actually, sorry, horizontal lines on this rock. It's subtle to kind of build up that texture that you see here. So I'm going to put a little bit more gray on my brush, just on the tip really. And then I'm just going to sort of randomly apply some horizontal line. I said vertical because it's vertical from how I'm working right now. So for me, vertical, if you're working like me, vertical, otherwise horizontal. You can't get it wrong. Just put on a few horizontal lines to start to build up the texture of rock number 2. Rock 4 receives a very similar technique, but we're going to use the lighter of the two grays, the mousier looking gray or the cooler looking gray. I'm going to apply that along the top edge, and you can do a thicker line, the 1/8 of an inch thick line along the top and the bottom. Sorry, I've got to rotate to maintain control here with my microphone and everything else happening. And then place your brush in the water for a second, wipe it, and we'll add that diluted version to the rest of the rock and allow this diluted version to organically merge in with the pure light gray we initially applied. And then just like with some of the other stones, I'm going to switch to the darker gray. And I'm going to apply that just to the very top edge and just to the very bottom edge in a thin line, just to start to work on my values here and shadows and all that good stuff. And you don't have to do the entire upper edge. You can just kind of focus it where that rock is underneath the green rock, or you can do the whole edge. It doesn't really matter. And then one more to go for this first layer, the pink rock. So the pink rock receives the same technique we just did, only we're going to be using pink to start. So your pretty mauve pink color. Let's run that along the top edge and the bottom edge, and then we'll apply a diluted version of it to the middle. So top edge, bottom, I'm going to rotate here, bottom edge, and then brush in the water, wipe just once or twice because this is a pretty big rock, and apply the water to the rest. I really like this pink color. My daughter is wearing a shirt today that is this color. Actually, it's my shirt. She stole it. That's okay. I let her. All right. And then clean my brush, blot. And I am going to use the gray along the very top edge and along the very bottom edge, just like the other rocks. All right. So that is layer 1. Honestly, if you wanted really loose looking rocks, you could be done now. I think this looks awesome as is. You already have a little bit of texture going on, values. I say this a lot. really the thing you should aim for with your art is to get at least 3 values on your subject, a light, a middle, and a dark value. And we have that going already with these rocks. So you could be done if you wanted, but we're going to keep going. We have a couple more layers to do. So we're going to start working on details. So we're going to start back up at rock 1, and then we'll go to 3 and 5 and 7, and then do our even numbered rocks. So for rock 1, I'm going to make sure my brush is clean. So rock 1 is our lightest rock. So I am going to put a little bit of the lighter gray, the mousy gray, onto my brush and wipe it on the edge of my palette just to make sure I don't have too much. And I'm going to apply that light gray to the bottom edge of the rock to create like a little shadow. And then I'm going to use the very tip of my brush, almost like a pencil. I'm even going to hold it like a pencil. I hold my pencils weird. I use like a tripod grip when I write. I don't know if it helps me in art or hurts, but it's how I am. So I am going to just sort of draw on little lines and little shapes on the rock. And you can add as much or as little as you want. I err on the side of not too much. But one thing you can do, if you feel like your paint is going on a little too harsh or solid looking, you can soften the transition by rinsing your brush, blotting it lots of times like we did for the wipe technique, and then just running your barely damp brush along the edges where you sort of want to soften it and transition it into the rest of the rock. And then that also puts a light amount of pigment on your brush that you can then use and sort of apply to other parts of the rock to add a bit more texture. So it kind of serves 2 purposes to do that. By blotting and then kind of running it over, kind of creates a little more texture. All right, so there's rock 1. That's where we're going to end for now before we do just final touch-ups. So rock 3, the green rock, we're going to move on to. I am going to start by applying the darker of our 2 grays to the very top edge and bottom edge of the stone. So I'm going to do that again because I feel like this rock just needs a little bit more gray, a little more color along the bottom edge and the top edge. And again, I feel like those went on a little too harsh. I want them to transition into the green. So I'm going to rinse my brush, blot it. And I'm going to run it just along the top edge of the bottom line and then the bottom edge of the top line to kind of help smooth that transition. And then it puts a little bit of that gray on my brush that then creates a little more texture on this rock, which is kind of a nice little touch. And then I'm going to also use the green again, and I'm going to use the green to add a little bit of texture on this rock. So again, I'm going to do a few dots, maybe a few small lines, just add a little more texture, just like I did up here. And you can do the same process on each rock, or you can bury it, but I'm once again going to blot and then just kind of smooth onto the rock just to kind of create a little more texture. So you can see how close these look now, even after just that second step. I'll hold it up so you can see a little bit closer. If I had a cameraman, they'd be zooming in and out through this whole class, but I don't have that. So, all right, so rock 5. Rock 5, we're going to once again use blue, and we'll also use the gray. So I'm going to first apply blue just to the top edge, and then I'm also going to use it to apply a few more markings on the rock as well, and then we'll end the blue rock with gray. So I'm going to start with the blue. So I'm going to apply it along the top edge because we want the top to be a little bit darker than everything else. So I'm going to apply it pretty much as thickly as I did on that first step, 1/16 of an inch or so. And then I'll immediately kind of go in and create some more dots and lines and patterns, texture. And we already have a bit of texture even from the first step, but we're just adding a little bit more this time. And then to help it transition, because that's a pretty harsh distinction where I just applied it along the top and what's from the last step. So I'm going to clean, blot, and then smooth that bottom edge with my brush. That will put a little bit of that blue on my brush, a very light version of it. It almost becomes like dry brushing as you kind of just create a little more texture using the blue. And if you find you need a little bit more, you can always add a little bit more blue to your brush and do a bit more texture. But you see that's looking pretty good. But I'm going to end the blue rock by once again applying gray to the top edge of this rock. Top edge of the rock. And then I'm going to carefully add it to a few of the markings as well. So I might outline a few of the kind of circles I drew on, maybe do a couple dots with it. Might add a little bit more along the bottom edge too. I think mine needs it. So we're just sort of slowly working on details. And then if you need the gray to transition a little better, same thing, rinse, dab, and then just kind of smooth with your slightly wet brush. All right, so there's our blue rock for now. Okay, so navy. The navy rock, rock number 7, the very bottom rock, the foundation rock. We're going to once again apply navy to the top edge of the stone because we want the top to be darker than the bottom. We're going to apply navy to the top edge. And then I am going to help that transition down the middle of the rock by rinsing my brush, blotting, and then just kind of moving it along that bottom edge, sort of help transition it a bit. And we'll add a little bit more navy in a subtle manner towards the bottom of the rock too. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to outline the edges of each arch with the navy. So I'm going to use the very tip of my brush. This would be where, if it's easier, you can use a smaller brush, like a 0 might be good. I'm going to use the very tip of my brush, and I'm just going to carefully and thinly try to outline the outer edges of each arch, the horizontal one and the vertical one. We want them to have some presence to them. And you can also smooth those lines if you want. You can smooth them and it will kind of help soften the transition. If you want, I think sometimes a very distinct look looks nice. And other times I feel like I do a lot of smoothing. I guess it just kind of depends on my mood. And then we'll end this one. Well, I guess we won't end this one. We're going to use gray next. So I'm going to put the darker gray on my brush. A little bit of darker gray. And I'm going to run that just under the blue I put on the bottom of the horizontal arch. And I'm going to clean my brush, blot it, and I'm going to help that transition to the rest of the lower part of the rock. When I was making this tutorial, I just felt like the bottom part of the rock needed a little bit more color. So adding just a touch of gray to the bottom part of the rock, I just think helps a lot. And you can add a little bit to the top too, but you just kind of want to add a kind of a watered down version of it. And then to really end this rock for this particular step, I'm going to put a little bit more navy on my brush and just do a couple little markings along the bottom. They may bleed out into the gray we just painted on, and that's okay. We can fix that up in our next step. Just a couple little markings here or there for a little bit more detail. All right, so rock 2, we're going to work on our evens now. I am going to use the darker gray and the navy for this rock. I'm going to start with the gray. I'm going to put some gray on my brush, and I'm going to apply just more horizontal lines to this rock. So you can go over the ones you already did if you want to make them a little more distinct, or you can apply some new ones. The goal is just to not completely cover the first layer we did. So I'm going to just kind of thinly apply some lines, some horizontal lines. You really can't get this wrong. We just kind of want to create that texture for the rock. So if I hold this up, you can see they're horizontal lines, but I'm not totally covering what I've already done. That's the goal here. And then to end this rock, I'm just going to apply a very thin line of navy to the very bottom edge, just to add that dark color there. Darken that very bottom edge. And this rock almost looks done, doesn't it? I think. Okay, rock 4. Might seem weird, but we're going to start with green actually on rock 4, which is a gray rock. The reason why is we're going to pretend the green rock above it sort of reflects onto the rock below it, which often happens in nature. A lot of cast shadows or highlights pick up colors from surrounding areas. So we're going to mimic that with this piece. So I'm going to put a little bit of the green on my brush, And sort of upper right middle, so sort of right here, I'm kind of doing a circular motion with my brush. I'm just going to apply sort of a thick little patch of green, and it just sort of creates like a little cast of green on the rock. And then clean and blot. And then we'll just use gray, the darker gray, the more elephant gray along the top and bottom edge. And use it also to apply a few markings on this stone. I'm saying stone and rock, but hopefully I'm talking about the same thing here. All right, so just a few more lines and dots on this rock. And if they go on really harsh, clean and blot your brush, and then just sort of smooth them with your slightly damp brush, which also creates texture. I really do like this rock. I think that green just really adds something to it. All right, and then last but not least for this step and every step is the pink rock. So for the pink rock, we're going to use pink and gray. We're going to add pink to the top edge and bottom edge again, just like we did with the blue rock, because it just needs a little more pink. We're also going to apply pink to these markings we drew on, just in thin lines over those markings. And then we'll add gray just to the top edge and to the markings as well. So that's sort of a snapshot overview of what we're going to be doing. So I'm going to load up my brush with pink. I'm going to apply it to the top edge and to the bottom edge. I'm going to go ahead now and apply it to the markings, and then I'll smooth out these paint brush strokes here. So apply it to the markings there. And this pink did go on quite harsh, so I'm going to rinse and blot. And as I smooth these colors, I'm going to try and avoid the markings to keep those intact and to keep those just a layer of pink I just applied, because we're going to go over it in a second with the gray. And I don't want the gray to just bleed right into the pink. So as you smooth out the pink, just try to avoid the markings, if you will. I feel like I could use just a touch more pink along the upper edge. Move that down towards the bottom. All right. So I have my pink on, smoothing it out. When you're done with the pink, you'll put the darker gray on your brush. You can see how wet my paper towels are. A lot of blotting today. All right, so gray on my brush. I'm going to apply it along the top edge, darken that up, and then I'm going to go over these markings in a thin line with the gray. So I'm not totally covering the pink, or I'm not trying to totally cover the pink. I'm just adding kind of another dimension of color. And then I can also just add a few more markings with the gray. And again, if you need to smooth, just clean blot your brush and then just kind of run it in to smooth. Or run it over. All right, so there's layer 2. Not too bad. And now really, I mean, they look pretty close, right? The finished versus this one with the second layer. So really it's now just minimal finishing touches to the rocks, where I just looked at it. I'm like, oh, I think this rock needs to be grounded more with a little more gray, or in this case, we may even use navy to darken. So we're going to just add some final touches. So to rock 1, very top rock, I'm going to use the darker gray. So up till this point, you've just used white and light gray on the top rock. So we're going to add a darker gray now that will kind of serve as the dark value for this rock. And I'm just going to do a thin line of it on the bottom of the rock. And then I'm also going to use it just to kind of re-outline a couple of the markings on the rock, just to add a bit more, I guess you could say, depth or emphasis. Almost couldn't say that word. And then you can smooth if you need to kind of help it transition. But just that little bit more gray just really helps this rock here, just kind of grounds it. We are done with rock 3. I don't think I want to do anything else to this rock. This looks good and finished to me. So rock 5, which is your blue rock, I am going to apply navy to the top and bottom edge, just to darken the top and bottom edge a bit more. Rotating my work. And I'm going to kind of help those transition by wetting and blotting my brush, and then just kind of running it over. And then I think that looks pretty darn good. That looks a lot more like this one now that I added that other blue, that other dark value. That was rock 5, just the navy. Rock 7, I'm just going to once again apply navy to the very top edge, just to sort of ground it a bit further. Sometimes to the navy one, I'll also add a bit more gray. Sometimes I feel like it needs a bit more. I think it does now. I'm not even going to rinse my brush. I'm going to keep the navy that's on my brush, just put the very tip of my brush into the gray. And I might just add a bit more gray towards the top of the rock. So add a little bit of a darker color. And then clean and blot to kind of help smooth that color on. All right, I think that looks pretty good. I might put it just, this is not in the written directions, I might put just a little bit of navy along the bottom edge of my horizontal arch because I just think it needs it. And I also think it might need me to outline the markings on the bottom part of the rock too with navy, using just the tip of my brush. So this is just an example of how each time you make it, it's going to turn out a little different. And what mine may need, yours may not, or what yours may need, mine may not. So it's sort of just kind of have to look and see what you think it might need. So that's rock 7. I ended up using indigo, or sorry, the navy and the gray. Okay, rock 2, which is our smallest rock in terms of width. I am going to just add a little bit more of that dark gray to the vertical lines. This is going to be real subtle. I'm probably going to add it to about 25% of what's here. I just want them to like really stand out, and adding another layer will make these the darkest ones. So just a couple, using that dark gray over top of the stripes I've already added. And then I'm going to apply navy just to the bottom edge, just to really help set that rock in and give it some dark value. And now that one looks good and finished. Now that I'm done fussing with it. All right. We are ready for stone 6, final touches on stone 6, which is our pink rock. I am going to apply that darker gray to the markings again. And then I'm just going to apply navy to the very top edge. So I'm going to use the darker of the 2 grays. I'm going to apply it very thinly to the markings on the rock, not trying to cover the pink and gray I've already used, just trying to sort of set them in a little bit more. So I'm kind of doing it along the top of the markings. And then you could always add, you know, a few more lines and dots along the bottom for texture if you wanted. Might even, with what's on my brush, just add a little bit more gray to the top of the rock too.
Andy, when you get done with that, can you like do a nice good close up and like pan it down from the top to bottom so everybody can see those details?
Oh, sure. All right. So let me add navy to the top edge and then I'll do that, because after I add navy to the very top edge, we're done. We just have to do the lettering. So this project doesn't take too long. Okay. So I'll try and see if I can do both side by side. Okay. Is that good?
Perfect.
All right. And you guys, if you rewatch it on YouTube, you can pause this step and then kind of stare at it. So, all right. So for the lettering, I'm using this 1.0 millimeter fine liner marker, but you can use whatever marker you have. And there's nothing fancy about the lettering today. Sometimes I tell us to thicken up the downstrokes. We're not doing that today. We're literally just drawing each letter. So I'm just going to go over each letter with this marker to write on the lettering, find balance. And I hope whatever your New Year's goal or resolution is, that you're able to meet it. I don't know that I'm off to a good start with mine, but the year is young, so I haven't lost hope yet. It can be hard to start new habits. All right. And I know we're just at 3 o'clock. I want to show you my class that's coming up. Actually, 2 classes that are coming up. One you can't sign up for yet, but I'll at least give you a sneak peek so you can mark your calendars. Okay, so if there was ever a time that I encouraged you to transfer your outline before class, even though it's not required, it would be for my upcoming class. And that's January 25th. It's this tiger. So I guess it's 2022 is the year of the tiger. So we're doing a tiger class, and this can be done in an hour. You have to trust me. But in order to do that, I will have to sort of speed through the sketch. So it may help if you transfer the outline before class, but I'm really excited about this class. I hope you are too. And then I will be having the class around Valentine's Day, but we're still hashing out the details of that. But I can show you the class that I have on February 22nd. It's these bamboo shoots with the lettering strength on it, because that's one symbol for bamboo. So you can also come back. This is the one that you can't sign up for yet. It's not on the Michaels website, but it will be soon. I'll be working on submitting this project this week, so it should be on there soon, but that will be February 22nd, same time as this class. All right, so I'm going to switch to my other camera, and I know we're a little over time, but if you guys were able to paint along with me, I would love for you to hold up your work so I can see what a wonderful job you did. And I say this every time, but feel free to email me through my website or tag me on social media so I can see like a larger version of it, because these are always like little thumbnails, but these look amazing. I'm so pleased with how you're able to keep up, and like just the colors are awesome. You did an excellent job with your color palette. I mean, beautiful job. Oh, and I love there's some where there's multiple people painting in the same household. That's awesome. I love that. Love it. All right. Well, thank you so much for being here today. It was great to see everyone. And I hope I will see you soon. Have a great day and Happy New Year.